Hello and welcome again. On this video we are going to start animating the lines. So this is where we left off on the last video. So I'm going to use the bottom line that we have here to show you the basic procedure that we're going to use on the rest of the video. So I'm going to click on this arrow to unfold it. So I'm going to go here where it says add and I'm going to click on this arrow pointing right. So this menu will appear and I'm going to choose Add Trim Paths. So as you can see under Contents, now we have a new option called Trim Paths. So we're going to click on this little arrow to unfold it, like this. And you'll see three options: Start, End, and Offset. So let me explain what these options do. So start and end refers to the starting point of the line and the ending point of the line. Let me hide every other element on this composition so we can focus on this line. So for example, if I modify the value on start, it will modify the starting point of the line. So for example, if I enter 50, it will move it to the middle point of the line. So we have moved that extreme of the line to the middle point of the trajectory. So the same thing applies to the end value. So let's say I enter 80, it's going to move to the 80% point of that line. So in other words, these two values control where the line starts and where the line ends. And let's say I enter 50% on both. So in this case, the line disappears because there is no distance between the starting point and the ending point of the line. They are both on the same point. Okay, so let me bring these values back to normal and we're going to animate this line. So I'm going to click on the stopwatch icon on start and on end. And before you do that, be sure that the time indicator is set at 0 frames. So I'm going to do that. Always bring the time indicator to 0. I'm going to zoom in a bit on my timeline right now. Okay, so far so good. Now let's move the time indicator, say, to frame number 15. And now I'm going to add keyframes by clicking on these little diamond-shaped icons, which are here on the left part of the layers panel. So there we go. I'm clicking on this on both start and end. So we have the first keyframe on frame number 0 and the second keyframe on frame number 15. So I'm going to modify the values here on the first keyframe, which is on frame number 0. So I'm going to put 50% on start and 50% on end. And for the second keyframe on frame number 15, I'm going to leave the values as they are so the line is completely visible. So let's check what happens when I preview this animation. As you can see, the line appears from the center outwards. So basically this is what I'm going to do with all the lines on this illustration. Basically I want the lines to appear out of nowhere as if they were being drawn. And we can even try different numbers. For example, instead of having 50 and 50 for the first keyframe, we can try having 0 and 0 on the first keyframe, and the line will be drawn from left to right. Now let's try entering 100 and 100 on the first keyframe. Then the line is going to be drawn from the right to the left. So I think I'm going to stick with 0 and 0 for this line, so it's drawn from left to right. I think I like that kind of animation for the baseline of the entire composition. So now I'm going to quickly jump to the first element, which is the tall mag. And we're finally going to start animating it. So I'm going to start by double-clicking on the composition called tall mag, and this tab will appear. You can move between tabs by clicking on them. And what I'm going to do now is to hide every layer that does not contain a line. I'm going to do this so we can work more comfortably and focus on the lines. So in order to do so, I'm going to activate this button called the shy switch. So I'm talking about this button that looks like a guy hiding behind the wall. If it's blue, it means that it's activated. And as you can see, we have this same shy guy here on the middle part of each layer. So I'm going to click on this shy guy for every layer that does not contain a line. For example, this one. So what I'm doing by doing this is to hide these layers from the layer panel so I can work more comfortably and I can leave only the layers that I'm going to modify. So as you can see, it's different than just clicking on the eye that hides the content, because we are not hiding the actual element from the screen, we are hiding the layer. Okay, so moving on, I'll start animating the lines. So I'm going to start with this one called base. I'm going to unfold this layer, clicking on this little arrow, then click on add, trim paths, then unfold trim paths. So first of all, I'm going to add keyframes for start and end. In this case, it will be on frame number 0. This is where I want the animation to start. And let's say I want this animation to be only 10 frames long. I think that will be enough just for this line. So I'm going to go to frame number 10 and add keyframes there. At this point, I think I'm going to zoom in on the timeline a bit so I can animate more comfortably. And I think I'm going to modify the start and end points so they are 50% each. Okay, just like this. I'm going to zoom in on the preview panel so we can see better what's happening. And let's see how it looks like. So as you can see, the animation starts at the middle point of 50%, but that middle point isn't really where I want it to be. It's a bit shifted to the right. So what can I do to modify this? Well, I can either start playing with the numbers. So let's say I enter 60 and 60 instead of 50 and 50, and as long as both numbers are the same, the line will be invisible. So as you can see, it's an approximation. Now I'm going to enter 65, which I think it's going to work better. But then again, this approach is not very exact and it's annoying. So what I like to do instead is to change the offset value. So as you can see, we have 0x and 0 degrees here. 0x means the amount of iterations of that animation, and the degrees will modify the start and end placement of this line. So I'm going to stand on frame number 1 so I can see a little bit of the line, and by modifying the degree here on the offset value, I can move the line around. So by the way, I don't need to add any keyframes here. I'm applying a global change, so no keyframe is necessary. So I'm going to leave the value over here. So it looks much better now, and I can manually adjust now the position of the line, which is a huge time saver. Okay, there we go. I like how it looks. Now let's move on to the next line, which is this middle part of the mag. So I'm going to contract this layer and I'm going to unfold the other one, then go to add trim paths and then unfold trim paths. And I'm going to go over here to place my first keyframe. I'm going to start on frame 5. So frame number 5 will be the first keyframe for start and end. And I think I'm going to go with frame number 10 for the next keyframes, which I'm going to add here by clicking on these diamond shapes. So I'm going to move back to the first keyframes, which I can do by clicking on these little arrows on the left part of the layer, or just press Shift and K on the keyboard, which I recommend a lot, so it's easier for you to move. Okay, so on the first keyframe I'm going to enter 50 and 50, and let's see how that looks. Okay, I like how it looks. In this case the middle point was correct, I don't need to modify that value. So I'm just going to leave it there and move on to the next line. So now I'm going to take care of this layer called line main, which is the main shape for this element. So I'm going to do the same procedure. I'm going to add trim paths and unfold that. And I'm going to start this animation at this point, this moment where the line touches the base. which is on frame number 10. So I'm going to place my first keyframes there. And let's say this animation will last about 10 frames. So I'm going to go to frame number 20 and add the keyframes there. So on the first keyframe on frame number 10, I'm going to enter 50 and 50. And there we go. Let's preview the animation and see how it looks. So as you can see, this animation is starting on the left side of the mag instead of the center, so we're going to modify that. So again, we're going to change the value on offset. We're not going to add any keyframes now. We're just going to click and drag on this number, on this degree number. So just click and drag until you see that the placement is correct. So there we go. I like how it looks so far. Okay, we're ready to continue. I'm going to click on this grid icon, which is here under the composition window, as you can see, which toggles the transparency grid, so I can see better now. So let's preview the animation again. Okay, it's looking quite good at the moment. So I'm going to start over here on frame number 25, and I'll press N as in Nancy on the keyboard. So we are changing the end point of the work area, so the animation will end and loop here. Okay, so I like what I'm seeing so far. I'm satisfied with the result. So having seen that, I'm ready to continue with the animation. Let's take care of this handle. I'm going to contract this last keyframe and expand the handle one. So we have two lines for this shape in this case. So we're going to start animating line handle 1. I want this animation to start here on frame number 13. So I'm going to add trim paths as usual. I'm going to add the first keyframe here, and I want it to end very quickly, so 5 frames in or so. So I'll place the first keyframe on 17 and go back to the first one, and I'm going to enter 0 on both values. So since I can edit the offset value afterwards, it doesn't really matter which number I enter as long as they are both the same number. So in this case, number 0 goes from the bottom part and goes all the way to 100 on the top part. But I want this to start a bit earlier, so I'm going to take these keyframes and move them just a bit to the left, just 1 frame to the left. And I'm doing so by just clicking and dragging. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to do the same thing for the other line of the handle. Let's say it starts here. I'll add the first keyframes on frame number 13, and it's going to end on frame 17. So since this is a very short line, a shorter animation with less frames will do. Okay, so this one moves from top to bottom instead of from bottom to top, but I think it works anyway. Actually, I kinda like it, but I'm going to modify the placement of this keyframe. I'm going to fine-tune it 1 frame to the right, and I'm going to make it end a bit after too, so the animation is not extremely short. Okay, there we go. Okay, I quite like the result of this animation so far. Okay, so as you can see, this animation is going really fast. You can change the pace to a slower one by adding more frames between each keyframe. It's up to you and your personal taste, but I'll show you later on a way to change the pacing of the animation. So as you can see, I'm adding a few more frames by moving the keyframes around on this animation. Okay, just like that. Okay, there we go. Okay, next, let's take care of the brown line of the interior of the mag. Let's say the line for the coffee itself. So I'm going to go there and, as always, unfold it, add trim paths. So I'm going to make it start on frame number 11 and end on frame number 22, or even before that. I'm going to try with frame number 20. So for start and end values, I'm going to add 50% for both, and let's see how it looks. Okay, again, it's a bit shifted to one side, so I'm going to offset it. So again, I'm going to click and drag to change this number, and I think this works. Okay, about here. So let's see how it looks like now. Okay, so let's take care now of this layer for the fumes. So I'm going to add trim path, and this animation is going to start after everything else. So let's place the first keyframe on frame number 24, and I'm going to make it end on frame number 34. So I'm going to make it start at 0 and go all the way to 100. Okay, now I'm going to deactivate the transparency grid so you can see the white line better. So it's going backwards, so I'm going to make it 100 for each value on the first keyframe, so it starts at the bottom. Okay, so far so good. So I'm liking it so far, but I think I'm going to do something special for this one. So I'm going to move the keyframes for end just a bit. As you can see, I'm just clicking and dragging. And here on the last keyframe for the end value, I'm going to enter 0%. So you can see that this line is making a different movement. It's being drawn, but it's also moving. And this movement works quite well for the fumes of the coffee. But I think I'm going to add even more frames to this animation. I'm going to make it even slower. I'm going to make it last until frame number 50, let's say. And there we go. Okay, so I'm happy with the result so far. So if you wanted to try different movements for the fumes, you can always change the distance between the start and end keyframes. So as you can see, try different things and it will look different, and see what you like. So if you keep the keyframes closer together, it's going to behave in a certain way, and if you separate them, it's going to do a different thing. So find out what you like best. In this case, I'm separating them by 6 frames. So in this case, it will look like this. I'm going to collapse the fumes layer now, and for now I am done. So on the next video we're going to take care of everything else other than the lines. So we're going to use masks, and I'll show you different ways of using them. So see you there.